I slid the folder across the table and didn't say a word. Inside it, every rent payment I'd made, every unauthorized charge on my credit card, 14 of them, totaling just over $2,300, the mortgage statements, the LLC paperwork, and at the very top, one page that said, in plain black ink, that the house we were sitting in now belonged to me. My dad picked it up, read it, set it back down slowly. My mom looked at Riley. Riley looked at her phone. Nobody spoke for a long time. And here's the thing. I wasn't angry in that moment. I wasn't shaking. I had been angry for months. By the time we got to that table, I was just done. Calm the way you get when you've already made every decision and there's nothing left to feel nervous about. But to understand how we got to that table, you need to go back about 8 months. Back to a Tuesday night in March, when my mom handed me a printed invoice over reheated pasta and changed everything. If you've ever been the one who handles things, the dependable one, the one who figures it out and then one day realize that dependable just meant you were the easiest person to take advantage of, this one's for you. Hit like if you need it. Subscribe if you want to stick around. Let's get into it. I was 24, working 2 jobs, living at home. Mornings, I was at the bakery by 5 a.m., flour on my jacket, before most people had even opened their eyes. Nights, I came home and set up at the kitchen table doing custom cake decorating for private clients. Weddings, birthdays, graduations. I was good at it. I liked it. Actually, or I used to before I was doing it purely to survive. The drive home from my night shifts was the only part of my day that felt like mine. Same playlist every time. Old indie stuff, the kind nobody else I knew listened to. I'd roll the windows down a little even in the cold just to stay awake and let the music run. 20 minutes. That was it. That was my decompression. Then I'd walk back into the house, and it would start again. My sister Riley was 21. She did not work. She had been figuring things out for going on 2 years, which in practice meant she posted online, ordered things that arrived in boxes I'd trip over in the hallway, and talked about building a brand. Our parents thought she was being entrepreneurial. I thought she was being allowed to be. In a way, I had never been. I wasn't bitter about it. Not yet. I told myself everyone moves at a different pace. Then came the invoice. Tuesday night, March. My mom set a plate of pasta in front of me, left over from 2 nights before, and then placed a folded piece of paper next to it like it was a receipt at a restaurant. I opened it. Rent, $800. Utility share, $300. Household contribution, $400. Total, $1,500. Monthly. Effective immediately. I looked up. Does Riley have one of these? My mom sat down. Riley's still finding her footing. I'm working 2 jobs, which is why we know you can handle it. I looked at the paper again. I didn't argue. I nodded and ate my reheated pasta and went upstairs and lay on my bed staring at the ceiling for a long time. That was the night something shifted in me. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew I was going to do something. What nobody in that house knew was that I had already been quietly keeping things running for longer than they realized. I hadn't thought of it that way at the time. But once I started paying attention, really paying attention, the numbers told a story nobody had said out loud. I opened a spreadsheet the week after the invoice, went back through 6 months of my bank statements and my credit card records. Groceries I'd picked up because we were out. A gas bill I'd covered 1 month when things were tight. A plumber my dad had asked me to pay just for now. Supplies I bought for the house without being asked because I lived there and I wasn't the type to let things fall apart. 6 months, $4,200. Not counting the new invoice. I kept going. I started noticing charges on my credit card I didn't recognize. Small at first, a subscription service, a delivery order, then bigger. I checked the delivery addresses. Our house, I checked the account linked to one of the subscriptions. Riley's email, 14 charges. $2,347 across 4 months. She had my card saved somewhere and had been using it like it was a shared resource. A family account. My money. Her purchases. I brought it up once, directly. Just the 2 of us in the kitchen. Riley, you've been using my card. She looked at me. I thought you didn't mind? Why would I not mind? She shrugged. Actually shrugged. You always handle things. Silence. No apology. No offer to pay it back. She picked up her phone and that was the end of the conversation, as far as she was concerned. I stood there for a second. Then I went back upstairs and added it to the spreadsheet. I told my parents about the credit card. Calmly. showed them a few of the charges. My dad said, "She probably just forgot it wasn't hers." My mom said, "We're a family. We help each other." I said, "With my card," without asking. My mom looked at me the way she always did when I pushed back, like I was being difficult when everyone else was just trying to get through the day. "Tessa, don't make this bigger than it is." So I stopped talking about it. And I started watching instead. A few weeks later, a coworker mentioned she'd seen a notice about properties in our neighborhood. She was into real estate. Always had her ear to the ground. We were talking casually and she mentioned that a few houses on the street were behind on their mortgages. "Which ones?" I asked. She named ours. I went home that night and I was quiet at dinner. I watched my parents talk about Riley's content strategy. I watched Riley scroll. I thought about the $1,500 I was paying every month, and the $4,200 before that, and the $2,347 she had taken without asking. I thought about the mortgage. My rent was going somewhere. And it wasn't building equity for me. It was keeping their head above water while they let me believe I was learning to be responsible. That was the moment. Not a fight. Not a big scene. Just that quiet dinner. My parents smiling at Riley's phone screen, and me doing the math. I was the buffer. Not a daughter, not even a tenant. A financial buffer between them and a problem they were too afraid to name. I excused myself, said I was tired, and went upstairs. Sat on my bed, opened my laptop. Started researching LLCs. I didn't move fast, I moved carefully. First, a savings account they didn't know about, not hidden dramatically, just separate. Mine. I started directing every dollar I could into it quietly over the next few months. I kept paying the $1,500. I didn't skip a month, I didn't change anything visible. I showed up to dinners, I reheated my leftovers, I drove home to my indie playlist, and I planned. I researched property law in our state. I looked into foreclosure listings. I talked to a contact, someone I'd met through a client who worked in real estate, and I asked careful general questions about buying distressed properties through a business entity. He told me about LLCs, how they work, how ownership can be structured, how an offer can come from a company name rather than a person's name. And then one night, scrolling through listings at my kitchen table while my family watched TV in the next room, I saw it. Listed as a foreclosure property, accepting offers. I sat very still for a moment. Then I texted my contact. There was one night, I need to be honest about this, where I almost stopped. I was sitting in my car outside the house after a late shift. It was cold. The playlist was running, and I just sat there thinking, is this who I am? Is this what I'm doing? Because there's a difference between protecting yourself and becoming something else entirely. I didn't want to be cold. I didn't want to turn into a person who calculated everything and felt nothing. I sat there for maybe 20 minutes. Then I thought about my empty savings account from 6 months ago. My exhausted body at 5 a.m, Riley's shrug. "You always handle things." I started the car and drove away. 3 weeks later, my LLC made an offer on the house. It was accepted. I chose a Thursday to leave, a day everyone had somewhere to be. I packed the things I'd been quietly moving over weeks. A box here, a bag there. Nobody notices what disappears slowly. I left a note on the kitchen counter, short. It said that I was no longer able to contribute financially to the household and that my last payment had been made. I thanked them for the time I'd lived there. I left my key. By the time they came home, I was gone. The letter arrived about a week later, I know. This because my mom called me, not texted, called, and she was already crying before I said hello. "There's something about the mortgage," she said. "It's been transferred to a company." I let her talk. "We don't understand what's happening. We have to call someone. Tessa, we don't know what to do." 3 days later, they showed up at my apartment. All 3 of them. My parents looked hollowed out, genuinely scared in a way I hadn't seen before. Riley stood slightly behind them, arms crossed, not quite making eye contact. My dad said they'd gotten the paperwork, that the mortgage had been sold to an LLC, that they'd tried to find out who owned it and hit a wall. I said I was familiar with the company. My mom asked if I knew who was behind it. I said I did. Silence. Then my mom asked, and this is the part I won't forget, she asked if Riley could maybe stay with me for a bit. Just temporarily. While they sorted things out, I looked at Riley. Riley looked at the floor. I said sure, $1,500 a month. First and last up front. Late fee after the 5th. My mom's face changed. "Tessa, that's the rate." That's what I was paying. Nobody said anything. My dad said quietly, "We were just trying to keep the house." I paused. I want to be honest. In that moment, I understood. I saw it on his face, the fear, the shame, the exhaustion of people who were losing something and didn't know how to ask for help without using someone else to get it. I felt something for him. I did. But I also thought about every conversation where the truth could have been told and wasn't. "You could have told me," I said. "You could have just told me the truth." The room went quiet. Nobody had an answer for that. Not my dad, not my mom, not Riley. A week later, we met again. I brought the folder. Everything. The rent receipts, the credit card statements, the LLC documents. I walked them through all well, if it without raising my voice. When I got to the last page, the one that showed the ownership transfer, my mom started to say something and stopped. I told them the terms. They pay rent. To the LLC. On time. Any questions go through the property management process. What happens inside the house is their business. What happens with the mortgage is now mine. My dad nodded slowly, like a man who had just understood something he should have seen coming. I've thought a lot about what that period of my life actually was. And here's what I keep coming back to. I wasn't the problem in that house. I was the solution they built their whole system around, and then resented when the solution started asking questions. The hardest thing about being used by the people who are supposed to love you isn't the money, or the exhaustion, or even the betrayal. It's the version of yourself you almost become in the process. Smaller, quieter, less certain that you deserve anything at all. I got out before I became that person. Barely. If you're in a situation where your reliability is being used as a reason to take more from you, pay attention to that. Because the people doing it will always have a justification. And the justifications will always sound reasonable until you do the math. The cruelest part of being the dependable one is that they'll never admit they depended on you until you're gone. I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually think about it before you answer in the comments. Have you ever been the responsible one in your family? And did that ever feel less like a compliment and more like a job you never applied for? Tell me below. I read them. If this story hit something for you, hit the like. It genuinely helps more people find it. And if you want to be here for the next one, subscribe. I'll see you there.